Good afternoon. Good afternoon. At the start of every event, there is always some lucky person who has to introduce themselves, and that's my role today. So I'm Mohammed Amin. I'm the chairman, or sorry, technically the chair of Liberal Democrats for Peace in the Middle East, although the man with all the power and providing the guidance is our president, DUVEEN, sitting next to me. On all subjects, but especially something as sensitive as the Middle East conflict, you really need to know where somebody is coming from when they're talking to you. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Pakistan in 1950, but I came to the UK in 1952, and I've lived in Manchester ever since. And I've been aware of the Israel-Palestine conflict probably since about the age of 12, because I was a real news junkie when I was young, and I still am. And I used to get my dad to buy me the Sunday Times and the Observer every Sunday, and I would spend Sunday lying on my bed, head hanging down with the paper on the floor, reading it. And I used to read about Palestinians launching what they called fedayeen attacks into Israel. And I don't speak any Arabic, but I understand that the word fedayeen means something like guerrilla, guerrilla fighter. And being a 12-year-old Muslim boy, I used to sort of cheer them on when I read these stories, even though they were actually committing acts of terrorism. Because it is such a natural behavior, especially in young, impressionable people, to support what you see as your side. I thought of them as heroes. Obviously, since then, as I've grown older and learned more about the conflict, my views have become much more nuanced and balanced. The big turning point in my life was 2005, when, for reasons nothing to do with Israel and Palestine, I was one of the people who helped to set up the Muslim-Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester. And in fact, I'm currently the Muslim co-chair. Our organisation is nothing to do with Israel and Palestine. We've designed our purpose clause very carefully so that it's totally out of scope to try to raise Israel and Palestine in any of our events or discussions. However, being involved with the Muslim-Jewish Forum has led to my having connections not just with Jews in Greater Manchester, but from there with the national leadership of the Jewish community. And as an example, I've known personally the last 5 presidents of the Board of Deputies of British Jews. The Israeli ambassadors Daniel Taub and Mark Regev have both separately hosted me for dinner at the Israeli ambassador's residence. And my wife and I have been to Israel twice at our own expense. The first time was at the end of 2009, when, as part of a group of, I think, 9 Muslims, 6 Christians and 2 Jews, we were meeting with civil society organisations. The second time in 2018 was organised by the Conservative Muslim Forum, part of the Conservative Party, because I used to be Conservative until the day that Boris Johnson became the party leader. And we were meeting with politicians. For example, we had 2 days inside the Knesset building. We had dinner with the British consul in East Jerusalem, we had tea with the British ambassador, and so on. Now, on my website, mohammedamin.com, I've written quite a lot about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and also I posted there 3 video presentations of talks that I've given on the subject. And if you forget the URL, just Google my name, you'll find it straight away. And I support many organisations that are trying to make the situation better. And that's why I've been a small donor to Solutions Not Sides, Sharon's organisation, for almost 10 years, I think. And that's why I got involved with Liberal Democrats for Peace in the Middle East as soon as I heard about it. As I said, Leon was the inspirer behind the initiative. Let me finish with just one key thought, which I got from reading a book by the late Israeli author Amos Oz. It's a very short book, about 60, 70 pages. You can read it in a few hours. The book is called How to Cure a Fanatic, Israel and Palestine Between Right and Right. There's a review of the book on my website. And that's the thing that makes the Israel-Palestine conflict so hard. It's not a struggle between right and wrong. In this conflict, both sides have enormous amounts of right on their side, and both sides have done many wrong things. And with that, let me hand over to our president, Leon DUVEEN.
Thank you, Amin. Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova, Salam Alaikum. Welcome, everybody. My background is that I used to live in Israel for 10 years. I have family who still live there. On the plot my grandfather bought nearly 100 years ago. I served in the IDF, both as a conscript and as a reservist. And that service included patrolling in a refugee village in Ramallah and tours in duty in Lebanon. It was that service that impressed on me the damage the conflict is doing to both the two peoples. It needs to end so both can learn to live side by side. And I started Liberal Democrats for Peace in the Middle East because I want our party to lead on bringing people together, to find an alternative instead of just being on one side or the other. Because all I saw were the closed attitudes of both Liberal Democrat friends of Israel and to an extent the Liberal Democrat friends of Palestine, though I must say they've been slightly more open most of the time. But they barely talk to each other. And I think if we can't within our party work to build a consensus for working towards peace, then where can we start with those things? We need to work with both Palestinians and Israelis to find a way where both can share the land they both hold dear, where both can be a free people in their own homeland. As 7 million Israeli Jews and 7 million Palestinian Arabs who actually live there now, they're not going anywhere. They're going to, without a lot of bloodshed. And I learnt of Solution Not Sides about 10 years ago and the work they do in schools around the country. I went to a meeting in London that Sharon was hosting and I got to know her and I started to think that would be great to bring that to conference at one stage. And so when Sharon contacted me a few months ago with the suggestion we do something like this here at this conference, and we found a way of making it work financially, we realised we had to go ahead with it, make it happen. I'm also delighted to work Adi and Hamza with us. As it turns out, I've been actually friends on Facebook with Hamza for many years, and I've followed his journey from when he used to work with the Ya'ala young leaders back in the day, which was a long time ago. I haven't met Adi before, but I'm sure their story is just as interesting and just as deep. And before I hand over to Sharon, can I just say we are recording this event on a video which we'll put up on our website. The camera is focused on us, the speakers, and if you don't want to be identified, we understand that. When we get round to questions, just give your question without giving your name or local party. But otherwise, it really does help if you say who you are and give your local party. And please, can we make questions and not long speeches, because I know Lib Dems. Okay, now handing over to Sharon.
We don't have to stand, no. So good afternoon everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So my name is Sharon. I'm the founder and executive director of Solutions Not Sides, or SNS. And SNS is an education program for secondary schools on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. And the unique kind of, I would say like USP of our organisation is that we bring young, pretty young, Palestinian
You used to be young.
We used to be Palestinian and Israeli peacebuilders from the region. We've been operating for over 15 years now across the schools. And I think one of the important things to say about our programme is that we are not a political organisation. We don't have a political agenda. As you probably know, the Department for Education has guidelines for schools that on any kind of political issue, the school has to be impartial. They have to give balanced perspectives and allow students to make up their own minds. So for that reason, we take that approach where we go into schools not to tell students what to think, but to teach them how to think. And we bring in various different skills such as conflict resolution, active listening, nonviolent communication, and other skills that can be really useful, not just for this issue obviously, but for all kinds of different issues that we are grappling with in our modern day. And these are the next generation. At SNS we have a real passion that the next generation will go out and be empowered and make a difference. One of our speakers always says, a conflict that we pass to our children is a conflict that we lost. And so that's something that we really hold and try to empower the young people to do better than previous generations. So obviously you can tell by our name that we don't take sides in a political sense, but not taking a side does not mean not taking a stand. And we take a stand on certain values in our programme. There are three main values that we base our principles, our Declaration of Principles around. The first one is non-violence, and the second one is equality for all, and the third one is rejection of hate. And all of the people in SNS and all of the speakers who join us from lots of different partner organisations in the Middle East, they all sign up to these values. So those are the values that we stand on when we work with the young people. And the kind of central pillar of education that we have in our programme is something called non-zero-sum conflict resolution. Just to unpack that, the way that we teach it to the young people is that if you keep pushing for a win-lose outcome, so one side wins and the other side loses in this situation, you'll probably end up not at win-lose, but at lose-lose. And we hear from the personal stories of our speakers what that really looks like and really means in human terms for them. And we're seeing more and more, particularly what's been happening in Gaza, but over the past 2 years, how things have just got more and more difficult in the Middle East. Horrifying scenes that we're seeing on our screens. It's been terribly difficult for all of us who are working in this space, but our thoughts are always with those who are actually affected on the ground in Israel and Palestine, and particularly, of course, in Gaza. So just kind of working with the young people to help them to understand what to do with these really strong emotions. Emotion is great, like we want people to go out there, to be active, to be political, but to do it in a way that is constructive and, most importantly, I think, that doesn't import the conflict here into the UK. And I think that's what Leon and AMIN have spoken a little bit about, but it's something that is very dear to our heart, that we don't become polarised and just tear ourselves apart over this issue and break our interfaith communities and break, have the left wing and the right wing kind of co-opting this issue with their symbols and everything else. We see that as destructive, and it's not going to improve things in the future. So what we need to do is to find ways forward on common values and support the peace builders on the ground. So those are some of the things that we bring to the students. When the students do our programme, they go through something called 3 E's. So the first E is exploration. They have an exploration session on the history of the region, looking at multiple perspectives. The second E is empathy, and that's when they meet our speakers, who you're going to meet in a moment. They hear their personal stories, they have a time of open dialogue and Q&A with them, and they can ask anything that they want, nothing's off the table. And the third E is empowerment, and in that session they do a future-focused workshop on what potential solutions could look like for this. So we don't prescribe what a solution should look like, we use an iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg represents the positions that people hold. So it could be all the land for Israel or all of the land for Palestine. But actually under the water are all the reasons why people hold those positions. And it's all the needs, the interests, the wounds, the assumptions and perceptions. And if we can understand those things, then we can start thinking about, okay, how do we find a solution together as an international community, and particularly through listening to the people on the ground, how do we find a solution that meets all the needs as far as possible? And so they do a needs exercise where they map out a future path to peace. We use Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anybody know that? Yeah, so we're applying human needs theory to conflict resolution. And the students discuss a one-state solution, they discuss a two-state solution, but they're not restricted to those ideas. Sometimes they discuss confederacy and other ideas and models as well. And the whole point of the programme is that they walk out, if they walked in, supposing, whoa. If they walked in supporting one side to win against the other, they walk out seeing it from a human perspective, that these are people who need real and lasting solutions, and that the political leaders, thus far at least, have let the people down. And that's got to change for the future. So that's kind of an overview of our programme. We particularly tackle anti-Semitism and Islamophobia around this issue as well, and also anti-Palestinian and anti-Israeli racism. And we have a quite unique way of doing this in our sessions. So if a student says something that is Islamophobic or anti-Palestinian, it will be our Israeli speaker who gently but firmly challenges that first. And if somebody says something anti-Semitic or anti-Israeli, it will be our Palestinian speaker who gently challenges that. I'll give you a couple of examples. So in one of our sessions in North London, we had a young man who asked our Palestinian speaker, who happened to be from East Jerusalem, he said, you Muslims, you have Mecca, you have Medina, you have the whole Middle East. Why can't you just move? And that the Jews have the only holy place for that. And I thought, oh, great, population transfer being advocated in the session, we don't want this. Our Israeli speaker stepped straight in, and he said, just before my colleague answers, I'd just like to say that I'm Israeli, and I don't want my country to be a country that believes that people should leave their home because of their religion. And my government is pushing that line, and I don't agree with it, and I want to stand against that. And he said to the young man, gently, he said, did you mean to kind of advocate for that? Because that's what he said. And he said, yeah, I suppose I hadn't thought about it like that. He was very thoughtful about it, but he'd been seeing it in this abstract, theoretical sense of what seemed like justice to him, but he wasn't thinking of the people. And we've had similar situations. For example, we went into one session where we walked in and the students started banging on the desk, saying, like, free Palestine from the river to the sea, Israel will no longer be, or so there was some kind of, they were chanting. They were advocating basically for a win-lose outcome. And like I said, we're fine with language in our sessions, we don't pull people up on that, but if people are calling for a win-lose outcome, obviously that's where our principles come in. So our Palestinian speaker, the Israeli speaker, and I shuffled off into the corner because they needed to speak to the Palestinian speaker. He got up and he said, right, I am Palestinian, I have crossed 3 borders to get here, I spent 2 hours in the British Border Agency being interrogated just so that I could come and speak to you. He said, I'm sick of people around the world telling me as a Palestinian what I should want. Do you want me to go and die in a war in Tel Aviv? Is this what you want? And the whole room went silent, and they kind of looked at him. And then one of the guys who was kind of the strong personality in the group, he said, well, what do you want us to do then? And that was the moment, because he asked a question. And Ahmed said, well, first of all, I want you to listen to me. I'm going to tell you my personal story as a Palestinian of what it was like to grow up under occupation in these circumstances. And after that, I want you to listen to the Israeli speaker. You don't have to agree with him. I don't always agree with him. But if we're going to move forward and have a better future, I need you to listen, because we've got to do this together. We're not going anywhere. He said, can we do that? And everyone in the room kind of said, okay. And they agreed. They were a bit hostile with the body language, but they did listen. And by the end of the session, they were round tables looking at different maps, calling the 2 speakers over and saying, hey, would Palestinians be okay with this if this happened? Or what would Israelis think if this happened? And I thought, yes, they're problem solving, now they're empowered, now they're thinking critically and looking for solutions. So that gives you sort of an overview of our programme. And I'm going to just pass over now to Yaniv, who is actually our stand-in speaker. Adi was supposed to come, but she fell ill last night, so Yaniv has stepped in, and Hamza. I'm going to hand over to them now to talk to you, because they are the role models that we bring into the classroom. The activism that they do, the international speaking that they do, the energy that they bring despite the desperate situation, is what inspires the young people and inspires me to keep going, quite frankly. So I'll hand over to you guys now. I'll read your biographies out just so that people kind of know a bit more who you are. So I'll start with Hamza. So Hamza has been leading programs that bring Israelis and Palestinians together for the last 12 years. Is that still in date? He's led Yalla Young Leaders, which brings young people together to break down divisions and barriers in Palestine. He's also worked for the New Story Leadership Programme and has supported many Israeli and Palestinian peace organisations to navigate difficulties working on the ground. Currently, he's the regional manager for Hands of Peace in Palestine. This encourages young Israelis, Palestinians and Americans to become change makers in their societies. He's got a master's degree in community development from the Hebrew University and a business degree from Berzeit University. That's Hamza. And Yaniv, I've got here because we had the last minute change. So Yaniv grew up within walking distance of the separation wall in Ayalon Valley. Yaniv learned early that understanding begins with listening to one's neighbours. This insight deepened during his studies at United World College in India and later at Cornell University, where exposure to Palestinian narratives through Palestinian friends transformed his perspective and commitment to advocacy. As a landscape architect specialising in cultural research, Yaniv creates spaces that foster healing and community across divides. He writes on social justice and human rights for publications in English and Hebrew, and he's currently co-authoring a narrative fiction book with his Palestinian collaborator, exploring shared stories that bridge cultural boundaries. So I'll hand over first to Hamza to talk to us.
Thank you, Sharon. Hi, everyone. My name is Hamza Awadin. I live now in Italy since 2 years, but I was born in a town called Jura. It's in the southwest of Hebrew. I am a grandson of one of the Fidaiyin that Mr. Amin spoke about. Actually, my grandfather created the first group of Fidaiyin in the south of the West Bank. He was a shepherd. He was illiterate. He was not even practicing Muslim. But when the occupation happened, he thought that based of his knowledge and based of what he knows, that you should fight back. He fought for 10 years. He was killed eventually. His body was sentenced to 10 years in Israeli prison. And I was born way after he died, but I came to life with this legacy. So he's extremely loved and respected in the Palestinian society, and I had to live up to this legacy. So I had to read books about politics and watch the news in Hebrew and Arabic since I was a child, because kind of people don't treat you as normal, and you have to look smart and you have to know things. So when I was a teenager, I was a second intifada. It was the worst time back then. It was times when I knew people my age were killed. It was times when the helicopters did not leave the sky. It was in the 2002 when my town was invaded. We had 60 days of curfew, and we were not prepared, so we starved. And I had also computer and internet because my father was working in the computer industry. So I was also reading and exploring the words and trying to find answers to things that doesn't make sense to me. And I honestly did read everything. Did read from Amos Oz to Al-Qaeda, to Fatah, to Hamas, to anything, because I do not have like ideological reality or anything, and I was like looking for answers. And this led me to actually use the internet to have a conversation with Israelis. This before, like, there was barely Facebook back then. And from that, we created the Yalla Young Leaders in 2011, which used the Facebook to connect young people of Israel and Palestine who already believe in values of human rights, equality, enlightenment as a way to coexist as people, not only in Israel and Palestine, but coexist generally in the world. So we were not actually reaching to the unconvinced. We believe that there are a lot of people who are convinced, but they are not having any space to meet and have an umbrella. As it was online and we launched it, it actually attracted young people from the entire Middle East. So we had 1 million followers from Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Algeria, Morocco, and Israel and Palestine, of course. And it was an eye-opening how much, among especially young people, there are people who actually take it literally that this is the values that they want to live in. Even though like you could find that they come from a house that actually has a father or a mother who's a figure in something totally opposed to these things. But it's natural to come to people that they want this, and I think it happened all over the history. What we were advocating for, and this was sponsored by Shimon Peres, Uri Savir, and some leaders of the PLO that officially backed this initiative. And they backed it because they realized that everything they have tried has failed. So out of desperation, why not? They were architect of Oslo and all the peace process, the classical one that we know it, and they reached the conclusion that we are running out of time from disasters, and we have to try anything new. So this was one of the things that are new and they supported. And they were right. I mean, it was clear for us that every day it passes, we are losing any framework for civilized the end of this conflict. That dogma and way of thinking that existed before 1948 is actually gaining momentum. So you see the majority of the Israeli society, especially the young people, are moving nowadays to the right. But that's way before October 7th as a trend. And you see also the Palestinians extremely skeptical of the PA, PLO, and the two-state solution, and all the negotiation peace process. So October 7th happened. I was in Ramallah, and I was surprised by where it happened, but I was not surprised that it happened. Like, in my talking points at all the meetings I was doing before October 7th, and actually I came October 3rd from Washington, D.C. I had a meeting in the White House and the State Department. I was telling them that you can smell it in the air. Like, you cannot expect any nice thing to happen from that land with all these things, like with all these circumstances going on, because you're not entitled to stability when no one is working for stability. You're not entitled to peace when no one is working for peace. Everyone is doing the opposite, under the eyes of the whole world. Like, there's nothing was secret. Everything bad was happening on the ground was visible to all the world, but the world was indifferent. And I told them, any stable day in Israel and Palestine, it's an exception, it's not the rule. I went back and in Ramallah survived, luckily not to be killed by the Israeli army. And I was like, in that moment, yet before October 7th, I was like, I'm telling the Americans that's not sustainable, and I myself stay there. So I started thinking about moving away with my son. Then October 7th happened, and we moved immediately to Italy. And I had a reflection about everything we have done so far, and for me, the whole peace builders failed. I'm not blaming them, but I also want to share responsibility that we failed to win the majority of the Israelis and Palestinians. So maybe we have not been as smart as the other camp, let's put it this way, because they won. So with this reflection, I really think we have to revisit all our assumptions about what peace means in Israel and Palestine, because from the time we have adopted the two-state solution and the negotiation paradigm between the Israeli government and the PA, everything has changed. Everything has changed. The people have changed, the world has changed, the facts on the ground have changed. And I believe sometimes that the reasons people on the ground did not identify with our message because our message was not logical. If we had more logical answers to their needs, if we knew what's their needs, not coming with already answers that, yeah, we know what the people want, and we know, we always just indoctrinating, peace indoctrination, also indoctrination. So we might have been relatable for much more people. And I also believe whatever happening in Israel-Palestine is not disconnected from whatever happening in the world. I believe the divide is not between Jews and Palestinians, or West and East, or wherever. It's a divide between values that comes from enlightenment and from progress, and values that comes from dogma. This is the real divide. There's no Palestinians, there's no Israel. Even the Israelis are extremely divided, and the Palestinians are extremely divided in a dangerous way around these values. And the same in the world, you see it everywhere. And this is how we should also look for solutions. I don't think 2025 we should find solutions from religious books. While all respect to religious books, and they have a lot to teach us and symbolism, we live now in an era of science and psychology and sociology, and this also for me religion, because these are from our brains, and we are created by God to be able to think. And so I want to push against not only the right wingers in Israel, but also elements in the Palestinian society and also elements around the world, around where I build my choices in life based on which values, because I don't want to fight or have to make a reconciliation between someone who make his legitimacy from dogma and someone who wants to make his legitimacy from the fact that we are living here. We have to be nice to each other, and we should have constitution, and we should have same rights, we should have leaders who care about us. Because if we have to normalize one dogma, then it will be answered by another dogma. But if we normalize all over the world that certain kind of framework of thinking, then you rally people who come from all different backgrounds around this, because it isn't us who want society that is run by the most advanced human values that we have right now. So this has always, since October 7, my talking points. I no longer talk about two-state solution. I'm not against two-state solution, but I want to be open-minded about everything. And in the schools in the UK, you really see how lucky these kids to meet Israelis and Palestinians, because the people I met in my school as a teenager actually maybe shaped my choices in life more than my parents and more than anything else, because when you see somebody smart come and talk in the class, you actually listen to them more than your teacher. But also because what we do there is not to indoctrinate them whatever, but show them complexity and critical thinking and tools that are useful for them, not only how they will shape their attitudes towards Israel-Palestine, but how they will shape their attitude towards everything in life. And they're really lucky to have us and us, like really honestly, not because Sharon is here. Because if I have a kid, I would love my kid to also come out from school, at least knowing critical thinking and knowing that people are different and people have stories, and the national narratives and individual narratives are not the same, and like all the things that they get out of listening to an Israeli and Palestinian and interacting with, it's really exactly what every school should be doing.
Thank you, Hamza.
So I've been speaking, well, I spoke with Hamza twice before And every time I see him and meet him and talk with him, I get more and more inspired. And as much as you probably feel, I'm sure, feel so inspired by listening to his words, I think the best thing about SNS is really, for me as a person, the main reason I go is to meet those inspiring people. And I'm not a good fighter at all. And as much as we have to fight against all of these forces, I think we also must get inspired. And that's probably the strongest thing about SNS, that it really works on this need for us to get inspired by people who are doing so much. And so I'll tell you a little bit about myself. It was not going to be as exciting as Hamza's story, but I grew up in Israel with a lot of privilege. I was growing up very close to a Palestinian village, just next to, between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and I always knew that there was people on the other side, but my life was really blinded. Of course, life wasn't amazing with the terror attack during the Second Intifada, but it really didn't affect my life as much. I was pretty much blinded by it. And I grew up also loving stories and being very close to my grandparents, being very close to my grandmothers, who I loved very deeply, but I would always hear those stories of fear and trauma. My grandmother would tell me how when she was 4 years old, she got kidnapped in the 1929 Arab uprising in Haifa, and she would tell it to me with tears in her eyes, and she had so much hatred and anger at Palestinians. And for me as a little kid, hearing my grandmother's story, I would get very surprised and confused, because it was somebody I appreciated and loved so much, who was so kind to everybody else around her, but then she still had these intense feelings that I couldn't really comprehend how they both come together, and how she cannot forgive those people, and at the same time she's able to forgive everybody else. So I grew up and I was interested in getting to know more of those other narratives, but still, being in Israel with all the privilege, I barely had any interactions with Palestinians, because society is so segregated. So it was really, and I went to a few meetings with young youth or Palestinians, but it was really when I went outside of Israel, in the US, and I was able to have a more easy space, or a more calm space, more beautiful landscape around me, that was a bit disconnected with the conflict, that I managed to form a true friendship with a Palestinian. His name was MOHAMMED, and he was from Lifta. And once we were sitting, it was during my college years in the US, and we were sitting on the sofa and we were talking, and he was showing me some photos of his family, and then he showed me this photo of his grandmother with a big Star of David on her chest, like a necklace with the Star of David. And I asked him, did she have a lot of Israeli Jewish friends when she was young? Where did she get it from? And he told me, oh no, her family, my family, he said, is all converted to Islam in the 1200 when Salah ad-Din conquered Jerusalem, but they were all Jewish and they kept a lot of those traditions. And for me, hearing this narrative suddenly really blew my mind and changed my whole idea of what I thought I know, because I grew up hearing from my grandmother, all these Palestinians, they came from Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula, they should go back there. And suddenly I realized that there are so many more narratives and stories about those Palestinians that I didn't know, that just needed to be told, and really makes me, and probably everybody around me from my community, if I was hoping that if they would hear those stories, their acceptance to these other narratives and to this situation will change into the way they see the world. So I was deeply fascinated by those narratives, and I decided to continue and studying landscape architecture, which is not exactly related, but I felt such a strong gratitude for the landscape that allowed me to form this friendship, and then I wanted to create more landscapes that allow people to come together. And while doing these school years, I was able to meet another great friend of mine called Ibrahim from Bethlehem, who we met at a very beautiful garden in Jerusalem, and we were talking. We met through common friends, and then we were talking, and we were speaking about the importance of those narratives, and we said, oh, I wish there was somewhere a book or something for young people who could bring those narratives together of Israelis and Palestinians, so people will be able to listen to both of those narratives and realize that even though they seem like they're contradicting each other, they're not. They're both true in their own ways, and you have suffering and trauma and tears in the eyes of both grandparents from both sides, from the Nakba and from the Holocaust, and both of those pains are existing, and they still exist in the grandchildren. But we are here to live and not to only suffer. And if we want to live, we have to come together and listen to each other, forgive, and look into the future. And through Ibrahim, and then we decided to write this book that we're working on together. And during that time, I also started becoming a little bit more active through Ibrahim, because he is very, very active. He's still in Bethlehem, but he told me about solution outside. Sorry, I speak too fast. So he told me about solution outside, and I decided to give it a try, and I was really interested to hear more about what this organization did. And today when I just came and I met with Sharon, I was telling her how as a kid I was never very patriotic and would stand up for organizations, but Solution Outside is really an organization whenever I come and give a talk, I feel like this is how change is being done. When we go to students and we see how their perception of conflict changes, there is nothing more moving than that. And I do think that when we speak with them about the conflict and about how we need to look at each other and we need to look at who is being oppressed and how we can support each other, it's not something that is only about the Middle East. It's something that they can all take into their own personal life. I mean, who didn't have a kid in their class who was being oppressed, being ostracized, who is being laughed about? And I think that as children, by showing compassion and understanding and standing up for those who suffer just next to them on the seat in the next table, thank you. I think that's what children really need, is to learn more about compassion and positive figures who can inspire them. So thank you for making this amazing organization.
So we've got a good half an hour or so just to have more of a discussion. So I'll take two questions at a time, so hopefully we can get around more people that way, and I'll make a note. So feel free obviously to ask our speakers, or if you've got any questions about SNS, I'm happy to answer those as well. So yeah, we'll get first, and then you come back.
Yeah, so thank you firstly for your inspiring stories and for the solutions that you've suggested. It's really quite unusual now to hear messages of hope, but it is really hopeful, the solutions and the stories that you've shared. So my question, I don't know whether it falls slightly outside of your scope, but it is related, but because the education that you're talking about, working with, like shaping the mindset of young people, it seems very much within kind of our context here, and we, it's kind of maybe easier for us to be very empathetic towards all of the conflicting voices, because it doesn't affect us very much. We can only kind of engage emotionally. And I wonder whether, how can or do these messages land in the area where the people are really suffering from this conflict? So, because it seems like these messages of hope and love and unity are kind of a prerequisite to peace. But actually, for the people that are living that horror day to day, I mean, they're just trying to get through day to day, right? They can't perhaps also be sort of re-educating their mindset while they're just trying to get to the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, actually in the area where you're working, how does it land, and what are the solutions there?
Thank you. And at the back, you had a question.
Thank you. I'm Brian Matthew. I'm Member of Parliament for Melksham and Devizes. Again, thank you hugely, and it's a related question. Could you perhaps reflect a bit on the education from the UNRWA schools and also the education from the Israeli government schools, and just say if there is any of this openness in those schools in terms of this whole business of realizing common humanity.
Thank you. Okay, so there's quite a lot on education here. How do these messages that you're coming out with land back home in the region, and UNRWA schools and Israeli schools? So who would like to take it first? So you want to go again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I will start with the second question. I went to UNRWA school. One fact is that within 12 years of schooling, there was never any complete semester. And that's education. Because when you go 1 week yes and 1 week no, 1 day yes, 1 day no, you come to the school, teach me about love and whatever. Reality teach you much more than whatever you will find in the school. And sincerely, each teacher in the UNRWA school had their own opinion. The Palestinian society is extremely diverse in their opinion. Each family has all the political views. Each family. You find one Hamas, the brother is communist, the other brother is Fatah. The Palestinian society will never be united because we're not from the mentality of unity over how you think. Everyone has a faith. So there were teachers who were extremely in a shallow way for peace with Israelis, and there were also Islams. You know, it is what it is, part of the Palestinian society. Obviously, we don't have programs that teach about peace. Like in the UK, it's possible because the UK doesn't have a Jewish-Palestinian conflict inside. It has like a proxy problem because of its history, involvement there, and because we live in one world, connected world. So it makes sense to create such a program here. Now, if we can bring stability there, where like people are not surviving on a daily basis, when people go to school like pretty much in a normal boring day, then you can come and go to that level to talk to them about these things. But now they hardly can take the Arabic classes and the math classes, and we hardly can cover these things. And obviously in Gaza, we have 2 years of no schooling completely. And the West Bank also, they still haven't started the term because the PA doesn't have money to fund the schools because there's an economic war on the Palestinian people. And the PA doesn't have the money to open the school this year yet.
Yes, I'll also start, I think, with the second question. School back in Israel, it was very difficult to see this shared humanity. I think, or more than shared humanity, it was really difficult to see any mentioning of Palestinians in my growing up at least, and I believe that the situation is getting probably worse. And that's maybe why big organization and schools might not be the best approach to reach these children or younger generation. But hopefully maybe one day it will, when things will get better, because I don't see any other way of looking at things, and that I guess relates to the first question of how do people in the conflict area react to these kind of organizations or this kind of activism. And personally, I think that there are a lot of people with all the fear and all the tears, are able to stand up and to be activists. And I think that's the most, and that's where I decide to try to be a little bit more activist, because yeah, it's easy for me living in London to say whatever I want and call for peace, but when I see that there are a lot of people who are there and they are able to see through those fears and not be blinded to the suffering of the people just next to them, it is an inspiration and a reason to keep going, because I think it is helpful for them to know that there are people outside who support that shared peace, wanting peace.
Could you just tell us a little bit about Hand in Hand and Neve Shalom, and are some of these joint schools, I know they're a tiny percentage, are they still operating?
Yes, yeah, actually my nephew goes to one of them. There are a number of schools where you have Israelis and Palestinians that speak Hebrew and Arabic studying together. So there are all of those small organizations. It's a little bit too soon for me because my nephew is only in first grade, and he said that he's sitting next to a guy next to MOHAMMED, but he doesn't speak Arabic, so it's hard for him to understand. So they haven't played together yet, but it's only first week of school, so maybe in 2 weeks I can give you more, or 3 weeks hopefully, I can give you more uplifting views about how this kind of organization works. But I know that there are a lot of those kind of educational centers. There is Alava Institute in the south next to Elat, where it's for university where Israelis and Palestinians study together sustainability, and I've met some really incredible people who study there and started becoming really amazing people who do a lot of activist work.
Yeah, a lot of them kind of speakers in our programme actually. So okay, I'll go to the side of the room. So the lady and the gentleman standing next to each other at the back, yes.
Northern Ireland troubles went on for decades, and we almost gave up hope, but eventually we got peace. And I remember Martin McGuinness and Ian Paisley sharing a sofa laughing their heads off, almost unbelievable. Do the panel have any inspiration or hope from the Northern Ireland peace process that may be brought to the Middle East?
Thank you. And your question?
Purely a practical one, really. I'm a secondary school teacher who runs a Model United Nations club around the southwest, including our school. And I'm interested in the practical sessions. We've got a lot of kids who are very interested. And how do you get them to think critically? What do you do? Because there are a lot of students who are really moved by this, want to discuss it, but perhaps are afraid to do so.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, in Northern Ireland, do you want to speak about that? Are you inspired? Anything to take from it?
Yes, I mean, yeah, I think whenever I read a book or I watch a movie about Northern Ireland, the Holocaust, like any type of catastrophe that humans as society managed to overcome, and like looking at Europe, I guess in general, how 300, 400 years ago it was all, the land was filled with blood, and now I guess it starts again. But in certain parts of Europe, we don't. Like when you look how Germany and Italy or Spain or the UK in general, we don't have as much bloodshed. It is inspiring to know that humans are able to overcome those catastrophes. So I find it very inspiring.
Yeah, the same. I really find it very inspiring, and it's also good to see what was done there, that Palestinians and Israelis were denied. For example, America and the international community was on the side of peace. America and the international community was on the side of Israel. Until today, like even when Keir Starmer will announce a recognition of Palestinian state, he will frame it as something good for Israel. He ruins it, because for Palestinians, even if you give them the entire word because it's good for somebody else, you ruin it. and this is a problem. It was not the same in Northern Ireland. The American envoy, George Mitchell, was talking even to the terrorists in the American frame, because he was interested in peace. He was not which we never had. We never had this position. In fact, American mediators, and I heard it from the Israeli and the Palestinian negotiators, were more opposed than the Israeli negotiators. They would say the Israelis will not accept this, while the Israelis would accept. You know, so we were denied many of the things that Northern Ireland got. But also another thing, that peace in Northern Ireland is maintained through constant work. And also this is a good lesson, that peace is not like a day where you finish all the problems. It is a work that has to be done forever to maintain peace.
I mean, you wanted to just
Yes.
mention about Northern Ireland, Joe?
Yes, I mean, I don't have lots of personal knowledge of Northern Ireland. I've only been there once for 4 days, and in about 2019, and saw a society that's still very divided. In my view, the key thing that brought about peace in Northern Ireland was leadership. It's not from the grassroots, but leadership. We had the Prime Minister of the UK, the Government of Ireland, the leadership of the IRA and its friends, and the leadership of the Protestant community, all recognizing that this could not go on, that their side could not get everything that it wanted, and then working out with their enemies, what is it that we actually can achieve, and what can we live with? And that's the thing which is severely lacking at the moment in the Israel-Palestine dispute. My background is I'm a tax advisor, so I've got a professional training. If you have something to deal with, you read the documents. I've read the Hamas Charter of 1988. I've read their document of, I think it's 2016, which is supposed to modify it, but actually doesn't. And I'm very, at the moment, Hamas certainly is not interested in peace. And I've been being blunt about that. That doesn't mean that the people who lead Hamas aren't capable of changing their mind, but that it needs that kind of change of mind. The IRA was totally gung-ho on getting the British out of Northern Ireland until they weren't.
Yeah, it's true that Hamas doesn't want peace, but give me one single Israeli establishment leader nowadays who says peace.
Absolutely.
Give me one,
Yep.
and I will stand with him. You know, I completely switch this side.
Can I just also on Northern Ireland? There was a lot of work done before people realised it was happening, and investment programs going into Northern Ireland. Some of that work is also happening now in the Middle East. There's an organisation called the Alliance of Middle East Peacemakers, AMIN, and it's actually run by somebody from Northern Ireland who knows that work. I've spoken with John Lydon, and they are beginning to do that work to fund the peacemakers, to fund the groups that are working on both sides to bring things together, and they have people on the ground doing that work. And it's putting those building blocks in place that is the prerequisite. And yes, we need leaders to take those final steps to realise that it's better to have something to live for than to die for. But we need to start supporting these groups and not just sort of saying one side or the other, which is where I think this whole, where I come from.
Yeah, I really encourage you to look at ALMEP, Alliance for Middle East Peace. Most of the speakers that we bring are from organisations that are under that umbrella organisation. So yeah, they're worth supporting. I'm just conscious of your question about the young people and the critical thinking and how we do that. So I'll give you a sneak preview of our peace model that we're launching in 2026, but it kind of sums up the practitioner experience that we've brought with academic evidence base for the methodologies we're using. So the first element of how we work with them is the P, which of the acronym PEACE, which is participate, because I think there are a lot of young people, and not just young people in Britain, who won't want to step into a process of talking to people with different views about this, because they see it as kind of a betrayal of their own side, if you like. So the participate is particularly looking at what lose-lose means and what win-win could mean, and incentivising people to engage and to get on board with this, first of all. Then the E of the acronym is equip, because jumping into a room and trying to talk about something where emotions are very high is likely to do more harm than good. So we do social and emotional learning with the young people, which includes non-violent communication, active listening, emotional regulation actually, and understanding ourselves and when we're ready to step into this kind of conversation and what we want to get out of it and so on. So that's the second thing, the E. The third one is A, which is apply. So that's when we actually get on and do the dialogue. They have dialogue with one another, with a facilitator, and with an Israeli and a Palestinian who can model that respectful disagreement and so on. Once they've done the dialogue, that then equips them for the next stage, because dialogue as an end in itself is not something we recommend. We think it should be part of the process. So the next letter in the acronym is C, which is create. And that is where we do the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we've worked with the Palestinians and Israelis in our program to create some needs cards, which, and obviously we have to update them every year, sadly, but the needs cards outline the core needs and interests of the people, of Israeli people and Palestinian people. They have a Maslow's hierarchy. They organise the needs cards on the hierarchy to try to, obviously the needs at the bottom of the hierarchy, shelter and survival, come first. And they map out what past abuse could look like, prioritising those needs. And then they also then talk about the potential solutions that could meet those needs, as I explained. And then the last letter is another E, which is enact, and that's where active citizenship comes in. So there's no point us all sitting here in the UK going, well, now we understand this better, and in principle we support these peacebuilders and so on. We actually ask the question, what can young people here go out and do? And that can include writing to MPs, it can include getting involved in protests, it can include a whole lot of different things. But we look at how that they can be active citizens, preparing them for the future, to hopefully join the Lib Dems. Didn't say that. So that gives you an overview of kind of the programme. Right, 2 more questions, yeah. We'll go front row now. So 2 people in the front row, yeah, both of you? Yeah.
Despite what you're saying, who is talking to the people pulling the strings, like Iran? You know, and whoever's pulling Netanyahu's strings.
DUVEEN.
You think? Because I worked in conflict zones. I worked in the Balkans, in Kosovo, etc. I saw what the Serbs did in Bosnia, etc. And it's been there for years, and it's still there, simmering. You know. So it might, the Israeli-Palestine thing may go on simmering for longer than it already has. But it's the bunches of people pulling the strings that concern me and poisoning everything.
Yeah, speaking truth to power, who's doing it? And next question, yeah.
It doesn't look realistic that there's going to be any changes at the moment with the current Israeli government, but there's elections coming up. How realistic is it that those elections might change the way that Israelis are thinking, and how realistic is it for there to actually be anybody in control on the other side if it's not going to be Hamas, or is it if it's Hamas? How do you see the politics over the next couple of years in terms of elections and possibilities of a change in the mindset of those who are in charge?
Okay, so who's influencing people in power, who can put pressure on them, who can change things, and what are elections going to do, if anything?
So is that a bit too hard?
I can start with your question as an Israeli, knowing people from Israel. I think that maybe younger generation is thinking differently. I mean, maybe it's not in this election, but I do think that there is a little bit of a shift in the way young people are thinking, and maybe their concept of space. I think so many young people are so focused on the social media and Instagram, but at the same time, their mind is more dynamic and maybe more plastic to reconsider different type of solutions. So I think there is a lot of, in younger generation, you can see maybe the lack of appreciation for going deeper into history and learning about things thoroughly. But maybe this shallow thinking could allow more empathy with less knowledge. I don't know. Maybe it's a hopeful thinking, but maybe there is something about the way the generation changes and the way people understand the world around them that will allow them to change their mind a little bit more and give a chance for a new page. I mean, that's what I want to do. I don't know if you have any, and I don't know about the people who pull the strings. I read the news as much as you, and yeah, I don't know who are those people are. I think that it is a collective situation that is being created by so many different parts.
Just while we're on the subject of the Israeli election, before we move to the Palestinian, Amin wanted to comment on the Israeli elections.
Yes, I have a bit of perspective. In 2018, when I spent these 2 days in the Knesset building, we had a session with a parliament, an MK, a member of parliament from Shaz, which is one of the ultra-Orthodox parties, the Sephardi one. We had a session with political operatives, but not MKs, from Likud and Labour, and we had a session with an MK from the Arab Joint List. And of those 4 sessions, the one that I found the most frustrating was the hour we spent with the Joint List Arab MK, because I could not get him to change his mindset from thinking of himself as a disenfranchised Arab Israeli citizen in the MK who couldn't, in the Knesset, who couldn't achieve anything because all the other parties weren't interested in him, and also he couldn't do anything about Israel-Palestine because he could just do politics of the Knesset. So I was trying to get him to think about the fact that he is actually an Israeli MK, and he has the same voice on all issues affecting Jewish society in Israel as any other MK. It's a real problem of mindset. And the thing which frustrates me more than anything else about Israel's citizens of Arab origin, and it's always political what you call them, that's just the phrase that I use, but it's actually politically controversial exactly what phrase you use to describe them, that too many of them do not vote. Because if they all voted, they would control 20% of the Knesset, which is 120 people, so 20% of that is 24 people. As it is, the most the Joint List has ever got is 14 MKs, and that was sort of high watermark, it's drifted down. And in this country, I find I pull my hair out when people fail to vote. It's even more annoying when people in Israel fail to vote, because if you don't vote, the people who do vote get what they want. The guys who support people like Itamar Ben-Gvir.
Can I just add?
I want to comment about Iran, and this is an extremely important aspect. The Palestinians and the Israelis are very small, so when you have empire or semi-empires directly involved, for example, America is the main shaper of the Israeli society. I can name one American philanthropist who, when she donates $100 million to something, it changes a country like Israel. It's like $100 million in a country of 7.5 million citizens. It changed fundamentally the country, and she did with making the media, buying some media in Israel, changing the language in the media, supporting certain political visions. When you have American evangelicals, who now the main supporters of the Messianic political parties in Israel, more than there are more money from the evangelicals in the US than Jewish Americans. When Iran and even Saudi Arabia, the Palestinian society was extremely not practicing religious Muslims, but not like when my mother was my age, no one was fasting or wearing hijab. This was something for the old people. When Saudi Arabia comes and put some money behind making people religious for geopolitical reasons, for fighting communists and fighting Iran, within few years you could change the whole society. So it is a war on hypocrisy. And what was the question?
Just in terms of what the like of politics.
Yeah. I will not tell you a perspective. There are studies that has been done. One of them was published last week. It's not promising. I mean, maybe Netanyahu will not make a coalition, but it's not promising the results of the next Israeli election. The Israeli public have shifted more to the right. I mean, it has been shifting to the right since Oslo, but has shifted even more to the right, and the younger is the more, even more troubling. Even among the opposition parties, there's a majority who don't believe there's any innocent one in Gaza. Among the opposition parties, among the voters of the camp we want to win, their constituency doesn't believe there's anyone innocent in Gaza. So imagine the coalition. That's why I think what we need is not just to wait and see the next election, because we might actually get worse coalition. We need the actions to protect civilians right now and leave whatever elections does. This is for a long-term game. But the need now that there are people dying, and probably the conflict will expand. I believe next is Egypt. I believe the war with Egypt is imminent. If you follow the Israeli media, if you follow local media, and you see all the escalation in talks of leaders on military on the ground, we actually might have a bigger problem tomorrow, way bigger than now. So we need international presence there to protect civilians and create stability. And these questions, if the Arab voters will vote or not, that's really cannot be the source of the problem. That's really a symptom of the problem. I tell you, if I was Arab Israeli, I might not vote. You know why? Because none of the Jewish parties have ever said, I will sit in a coalition with Arab Knesset members. All of them, even now, they're trying to create a bloc against Netanyahu, and Gantz and Lapid and all the leaders of the opposition promised that in the future government they will not sit with Arab members of Knesset, while the right wing sit with Arab members of Knesset. So as a Palestinian, I have more trust with the right wingers, with Shas, than with the liberals, because the liberals are saying, in principle, I will not sit with the fellow citizens of Israel who happen to be Arab. So how can I convince young Palestinians to believe in the whole system when the dominant party or the dominant demographic say, in principle, we will never sit in a government with.
Leon, did you want to say?
I just wanted to say about the elections. First of all, I am worried there may not be elections next year. I am worried Netanyahu may find a way to postpone them because he knows he will lose them and then be out of office, not be able to stop his corruption trial. But the opinion poll I read just a couple of days ago has Naftali Bennett as the possible next Prime Minister, although he's not currently in the Knesset. He's a totally new party. But it looks like it will again be a coalition in Israel, led by Naftali Bennett with Yair Lapid and Yair Golan, who is the Labour and the Meretz combined list, forming the bulk of the next coalition. Who knows though? Israeli politics is very personality-led, more than principle, and things may yet change in the next year.
Right, we'll take one last question, I think, because I'm just aware of time and we need to wrap up. So I'm going to go for this gentleman at the back here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Rowan. One of the staff officers for the Young Liberals. We're basically pushing the European partners and stuff to get this kind of conversation happening, because when we talk to the Germans about this, it's not as productive as we'd like. We also kind of talk about shrinking civil space for youth groups and youth organisations across Europe and in this country. And my kind of question, and for the whole panel, because I know you've all been involved in very different civil society groups, is how do those challenges, how does that shrinking space, how does the lack of money in this area, the lack of support in this area affect the work you're doing to push? What challenges do you face? And to maybe draw in our two speakers, how does that civil society pressure exist in Israel, in Palestine, in other parts of Europe where you are? What pressures have you faced? What challenges do you face today? How does that impact the work you're trying to do?
Okay, let's maybe start with you two. So the pressures within society on the work that you do, how does that obstruct you, and how does it affect the work in peace building and youth, and particularly youth empowerment and so on? What's the situation? maybe
Yeah,
Yanid and then Hamza, and then I can talk a bit about UK.
Yeah, I can start with. I recently wrote an article from my visit in Israel about the situation, and after writing it, I sent it to a few friends and my family, and I was really taken aback by how much it made them angry, and made me question my own observations, and they had so many like I could really see how they are unable to see what is happening around them, how much the trauma of the war is shaping their ability to see the suffering of the Palestinians, to feel any empathy. So I think it is really hard to go through that and try to persuade people who are in so much pain. But at the same time, after the article was published, then they read it, and when they saw that a newspaper published it, and it wasn't just me being like blah 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 blah, they suddenly like, oh wait, if this newspaper is publishing what he says, maybe there is something nice about it, and said, oh, it's really really well written. So I think that sometimes people, when they see that things are successful, they're more willing to accept it. I mean, you always have those people who would keep fighting till the end, but I think the majority of people, even if their first gut reaction from what is happening is to object to this kind of peace building, when they do see that things are going through and being approved, and that everybody around them, and all the other countries are saying that there is a genocide, it does make them change their understanding of how situation is. Even for me, when I first spoke at SNS, and there was a kid who asked me, what do you think about it? Do you think that what is happening in Gaza? It was 2 years ago, and he asked, "Do you think what is happening in Gaza is a genocide?" I was a bit like, I'm not really sure. And the Palestinian who was speaking with me said very clearly, "Oh yeah, it is a genocide because this and this and this and this." And it took me some time to really shift my own mind about understanding of the situation, and it made and pushed me to research more and learn more. So I think that these interactions that are happening are helping to people shift their mind and be less resistant. I don't know if it answered the question.
I will answer maybe from a different angle. I think there's a decline in values of liberal democratic values and pluralism all over the world. I think part of it is to blame the liberal democrats, which one of them, which have weaponized these values and the double standards with each case. So in Ukraine, you should be a humanist and you should care. In Palestine, it's complicated. And this is an example, but also across the West, in America, I do not, like people say people who voted for Trump are stupid. The people who say people who voted for Trump are the stupid ones, because people have felt threatened. Their way of life, their needs were not met by the good guys. So where do they go? To the alternative, no matter how worse. So it is a time where we have to reflect and self-critical instead of shifting the blame on the other side, see how we failed. Because I think people are not stupid. People have felt that some people really benefited from these liberal, democratic, nice values, and a lot of people did not. And there was a lot of arrogance, a lot of neglect. And they have the right to, that people should not be loyal in politics. If this kind of mindset did not serve me, then maybe I should protect myself, protect my identity, protect my religion, and try to bring a past that never existed. But this is a reaction.
Yeah, so I think for the UK, obviously, tribalism is a big danger for our whole society and our democracy, and the young people are the future. So I think that, again, teaching them how to think, teaching them skills. We've got people in a more pro-Israel camp, if that's the right word to use for them, people in a more pro-Palestine camp are often growing up in total information silos. There'll be those who are being told it's a genocide and this is why, and there'll be those who are being told it's not a genocide and this is why. They'll never hear the arguments on the other side. So one of the things, for example, in SNS that we would do is to say in a classroom about this question, first of all, define it. Define genocide. What does it mean? Let's go to the dictionary. And second of all, listen to the arguments as to why people think that it is or it isn't, and make up your own mind. You have to think for yourself. And as soon as we get tribal and go into our parties or into our positions, and then you get people on the left and the right co-opting issues like Israel-Palestine, but not only Israel-Palestine, taking all the symbols, and then everyone in this tribe thinks the same thing about all of these issues, and there's no crossover and nuance. As soon as we go down that line, we've just got tribalism. We don't have democracy anymore. So that, I think the government needs to put a lot more money into this kind of citizenship education. It needs to be ploughed in, and people need to understand. They need to graduate from school knowing what each party stands for, wanting to go out there and vote, mobilised, because I feel I didn't really have that when I left school. And there's a lot more effort that needs to go into that. Right, it's almost half past, we've got 1 minute left, so.
Well, I'll try and do this in a minute. I'll probably overrun. This is the Liberal Democrats after all. Thanks to everybody for coming. I had a dream last night that we'd be sat here with an empty room. It's the first time we've ever tried anything like this, and I think it's been a success. I think it's been a riveting discussion, and we've all learnt more about the work of peacemakers in Palestine and Israel. The current situation is really dark, and many don't see any hope at all, but I think here in this room we've seen that despite that darkness there is hope, and with people like Yaniv and Hamza who embody that hope, that maybe we can find a way through. Today's event has happened because about 4 years ago I set up the Liberal Democrat Friends for the Peace in the Middle East, to have another way of looking at the whole situation. To carry on doing events like this, sadly, we need to make money. We need to get some money coming in. So all the people who came in and got seats will have found there were forms on their seats, which were to write a standing order for the party, or to sign up for membership. And any membership we take out during conference will actually last till the end of next year. Please, please join. It will help us become a proper, fully affiliated organisation within the Lib Dems. It will help us put on events like this next year in Brighton, and carry on the work that I hope we've been doing over the last few years, and get more speakers in, either online, our events online during the year, and carry on. So please fill in those forms. £10 is all we're asking for as a minimum membership fee. If you want to give more, we will not say no. Finally, can I just end with just saying one thing. Lots of slogans are said about the Middle East, and counter slogans, but for me the only slogan that matters is that from the river to the sea, make all the people living there be free.
Yeah.